A 12-year-old boy wandered just a few paces away from his classmates during a school trip, eyes wide, locked on a sleek aircraft parked along the runway. Within minutes, police were circling him, until his mother arrived and flipped the entire situation upside down. Ethan Rivers wasn't the loud kid in class. He didn't crack jokes, didn't fight to be first in line, and rarely spoke up unless a teacher called on him. But when his 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, announced that their next field trip would be to Clearwater Regional Airport, something in Ethan's quiet nature sparked awake. For weeks, he scribbled the date across his notebooks, memorized details about small aircraft most adults ignored, and talked non-stop about the types of planes he hoped to see. That morning, he dressed with care, a neat polo, pressed dark jeans, sneakers scrubbed clean enough to pass his mother's careful eye. Dr. Naomi Rivers kissed his forehead before he left, giving him her usual reminder. Stay curious, Ethan. Ask the kind of questions that make people think. He just smiled. That was his language. Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if the story moves you, drop your thoughts in the comments and share it with a friend. Now, let's begin. The yellow school bus rolled up near the terminal just before 9 a.m. A volunteer from the airport's PR office handed out bright orange visitor badges, ran through security basics, and gave the class a rough itinerary: maintenance hangar tour, lunch above the concourse, maybe a quick stop at the fire station. Ethan kept slightly apart from the group. He didn't want to look overeager, but inside, his heart was buzzing. His eyes scanned the runways beyond the chain-link fence until they caught on one plane in particular, a white and blue Cessna 172, gleaming in the morning light. It looked powerful yet calm, sitting in line with a few others. Ethan's imagination soared. What would it feel like to sit in that cockpit, to touch those switches, to imagine liftoff? While his classmates clustered at the gate, Ethan edged a little closer. Not crossing any lines. Not breaking rules. Just trying to see better. From the window of a private pilot's lounge, retired Captain Harold Denton noticed him. Harold, who'd flown commercial jets for decades before retiring to weekend charters, squinted into his coffee mug. The boy wasn't touching anything. Wasn't misbehaving. But something about the way he lingered by the plane stirred Harold's instincts. Kids don't belong that close, he muttered. He reached for his phone and called airport security. There's a boy out there, he said. Standing awful close to my plane. Looks suspicious. Better send someone down. Minutes later, 2 uniformed security guards approached Ethan. Hey, son, what are you doing over here? Are you with that school group? Why aren't you standing back? Ethan blinked, polite but puzzled. I was just looking. I really like planes. One guard gave the other a look, then quietly radioed local police. Back up. Just in case. Across the way, Mrs. Alvarez noticed the growing tension and rushed over. He's with us, she said firmly. He hasn't done a thing wrong. But the security team wasn't satisfied. From the lounge window, Harold kept watching, arms crossed. The boy was now surrounded. Harold told himself he'd done the right thing. Better safe than sorry. The distant whine of tires caught Ethan's ear before he even turned. A police cruiser swung sharply into the curb, lights flashing though the siren stayed off. The door opened and Officer Daniel Harker stepped out, tugging at his belt as he sized up the scene. He wasn't in a foul mood, but the way dispatch framed the call, possible security concern, minor near restricted aircraft, had already colored his view. Ethan stood still, arms slightly out like he'd seen people do on TV when they wanted to show they weren't a threat. His backpack dangled from one shoulder, one shoelace trailing loose against the pavement. His classmates were just beginning to notice. Some pressed against the glass doors of the terminal. A few whispered nervously. You got a parent with you, kid? Officer Harker asked. Ethan shook his head quickly. I'm here with my class. They're right there. He pointed to the cluster of students huddled near the entrance. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, her voice taut but steady. This is Ethan Rivers. He's one of my students. He hasn't broken a rule, he's just excited about the planes. But Harker's eyes never left Ethan. Behind him, Harold Denton emerged from the lounge. He didn't say a word at first, but the way he crossed his arms and stood beside the officers was enough. He looked like confirmation, like backup. Another officer arrived, older and quieter, hanging back while Harker peppered Ethan with questions. How close did you get to the aircraft? Did you touch anything? Why'd you walk ahead of your group? Ethan's voice grew thin but steady. I just wanted to see the plane better. I didn't do anything wrong. One of his classmates, a girl in braids, had already pulled out her phone and hit record. Another boy whispered, dang, what did he even do? Mrs. Alvarez tried again. Officers, with respect, this is a child. He hasn't crossed a barrier, he hasn't posed a threat. He's done nothing wrong. But the questioning didn't stop. From behind the officers, Harold finally spoke, his voice gravelly. I don't know what the boy was up to, but from where I sat it didn't look right. He was too close to my Cessna. Officer Harker gave a small nod. Appreciate the heads up, sir. To Ethan, the moment felt unreal. His heart thudded like it did when he forgot a big assignment, but this time, the weight wasn't grades. It was the way they were looking at him. Like he didn't belong. Like his curiosity was something dangerous. Mrs. Alvarez's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling his mother, she said firmly. Down the road, a sleek black SUV turned silently into the airport lot. The engine didn't roar, the tires didn't screech, but its arrival carried a different kind of weight. Inside sat Dr. Naomi Rivers. She hadn't answered on the first call, she'd been in a high-level FAA meeting. But when Mrs. Alvarez's name appeared again less than a minute later, Naomi's gut told her something was wrong. She closed her laptop, stood, and said coldly to her assistant, cancel everything. I'm going to Clearwater Regional, now. Dr. Naomi Rivers didn't need to be tall, or loud, or dramatic. She carried a kind of authority that slipped into the air around her like gravity, subtle until you realized everyone was adjusting to it. She stepped through the terminal doors, her heels clicking against the tile, eyes narrowing as she scanned the open lot. It didn't take long. She spotted Ethan, her Ethan, standing stiff between two officers, his classmates clustered like spectators, and Harold Denton hovering nearby like some silent witness. Her expression didn't flare with anger, not yet. It sharpened, something colder, something steadier, that made even one of the security guards instinctively take a step back. Naomi didn't rush. She didn't need to. Every deliberate stride was measured, all focus on her son. Ethan caught sight of her first. Relief flooded his face, but he didn't move. He'd already learned, too quickly, that even a simple gesture could be twisted. She reached him, placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, and finally addressed the uniformed officer in front of her. I'm his mother. Officer Harker blinked. His voice dropped into a more formal register. And you are. Naomi reached into her blazer with the same calm precision she used in boardrooms. She didn't pull out a driver's license. She didn't flash a school pass. Instead, she held up a credential embossed in gold, her FAA identification badge. Dr. Naomi Rivers, Administrator, Federal Aviation Administration. The title hung in the air like a thunderclap. The older officer at the back glanced at Harker, whose jaw tightened as he tried to mask the fact that he was caught off guard. Harold Denton stiffened outright. FAA? Harker asked slowly. As in? Washington? Naomi didn't blink. As in Washington, D.C. As in the federal authority responsible for everything that moves through American airspace, including this airport. Including that Cessna. Her eyes flicked toward Harold. And including the way you all enforce protocol. Harold's mouth opened, but no words came. Naomi crouched slightly, lowering herself to Ethan's level. Are you okay, baby? Ethan nodded quickly, his voice cracking. I didn't do anything. I just wanted to see the plane up close. I know, she said gently, brushing his shoulder before standing again. Her gaze locked back onto Officer Harker. Her tone remained calm, but it carried the weight of a gavel. Tell me something, officer. If my son had blonde hair and freckles, would we still be standing here right now? The silence was suffocating. Harker's lips parted as if to answer, but nothing came. Naomi didn't need the reply. The question alone was enough. Naomi didn't waste another glance on the officer. Her eyes cut through the crowd and landed on Harold Denton, the man standing just far enough back to look uninvolved, yet close enough to feel like he was pulling the strings. You, she said, her voice low but razor-sharp. Harold stiffened. Ma'am, I was simply. You were simply what? Naomi stepped toward him, her heels striking like drum beats. Standing by. Watching a child, my child, get treated like a suspect for existing near a plane. The onlookers went still. Even the chatter from the terminal behind them seemed to fade. Harold tried to gather himself, but his words stumbled out. Safety protocols, Dr. Rivers. We can't just have anyone wandering near. Safety. Naomi cut in, her tone biting. Safety is about preventing harm. What I see here isn't about safety. It's about suspicion. And suspicion, Harold, is shaped by bias. His face colored, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. Naomi moved closer, enough that Harold had to tilt his chin up slightly. Her presence pressed in on him like a storm front. You've worked this airport for what, 20 years? 30. 28, he muttered. 28 years, Naomi repeated, her voice carrying so the crowd heard. And in all that time, tell me, how many white boys have you seen pulled aside for daring to admire an aircraft from the fence? The question was a knife, clean and precise. Harold opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Naomi didn't let the silence breathe. That's what makes this moment so ugly. Because this isn't just about my son. It's about every child who learns too early that curiosity is dangerous when it lives in the wrong skin. Ethan's classmates shifted uncomfortably, realization dawning on some of their young faces. Harold's jaw tightened, but Naomi pressed harder, her voice steady, unyielding. And here's the part you don't understand, Harold. My son isn't just another boy you can shadow and dismiss. He is the child of a woman who helps write the very protocols you pretend to enforce. He is protected. But what about the ones who aren't? The ones who don't have someone with a federal badge to step in? The weight of her words hit like a verdict. For the first time, Harold Denton, so smug in his silence, looked small. Naomi turned, not just to Harold, not just to the officers, but to the growing circle of eyes fixed on her. Travelers had slowed. Students from Ethan's school shifted uncomfortably. Even the second officer, older and grayer, seemed to bow his head a fraction as if recognizing the weight of what was unfolding. This, Naomi said, her voice carrying across the lot, is what it looks like when bias dresses itself up as procedure. A boy, barely tall enough to reach the top of the fence, suddenly becomes a threat because of how he looks. That is not security. That is profiling. Ethan's classmates glanced at one another, their earlier snickers silenced. Naomi rested her hand lightly on her son's shoulder. Do you know what Ethan wanted, before this spectacle? She asked the crowd. He wanted to see an airplane. He wanted to marvel at the same machine that carries each of you across oceans, that makes this very airport run. Curiosity is what built this country. It's what fuels progress. But what lesson have you tried to give him today? That his curiosity is criminal. Her words struck the air with an almost physical force. Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes wide, standing straighter now under his mother's steady hand. Naomi scanned the faces before her. And here's the truth you all need to hear: when we teach children to be ashamed of their wonder, we clip the very wings that could one day carry us further. When we treat one child's questions as dangerous, while another child's questions are celebrated, we decide, consciously or not, whose future matters. Silence. Total, unbroken silence. Even Officer Harker, the one who had been most aggressive, couldn't find a single defense. Naomi exhaled slowly, her voice softening but not losing its edge. My son will not carry this humiliation as his story. Not today. Not ever. Because he has me. But what about the next boy who doesn't? That's the reckoning you should all think about long after this moment is over. She straightened, her hand sliding protectively to the small of Ethan's back. We are leaving now. And just like that, Naomi turned. Ethan moved with her, his shoulders squaring as if her courage had poured directly into him. The crowd parted. No one stopped them. No one dared. Naomi and Ethan walked back toward the terminal, the crowd parting as though a tide was being pulled by something greater than them. The sound of their steps echoed, unhurried, deliberate. Behind them, whispers rose, low, uneasy currents among the students. A few of Ethan's classmates exchanged glances, their earlier smirks now replaced with something closer to shame. They'd laughed when he was cornered. Now they couldn't shake the image of his mother dismantling the entire scene with nothing but truth and presence. Harold Denton remained rooted near the fence, his hands flexing at his sides, face pale. For 28 years he'd lived in this airport's shadow, never questioned, never called out. But in less than 10 minutes, Naomi had exposed what he'd carried for decades, a habit of suspicion, sharpened by prejudice. He felt the eyes on him, the unspoken verdict of everyone who'd watched. For the first time, Harold realized silence wouldn't save him. His silence had betrayed him. Officer Harker muttered something under his breath to his partner, but even he didn't move to pursue Naomi. The badge she carried, the authority she wielded, it wasn't just power. It was legitimacy. And Harker knew if he pushed further, this wouldn't end in a quiet corner of an airport lot. It would end in Washington. Meanwhile, Ethan's steps grew steadier. Every inch closer to the terminal, he felt a shift inside him. A half hour earlier, he had been a boy singled out, mocked, and pressed down by authority. But walking beside his mother now, he wasn't just Ethan Rivers, the kid who liked planes. He was Ethan Rivers, the son of a woman who refused to let the world define him by suspicion. As they reached the glass doors, Naomi finally bent down, her voice meant only for him. You hold your head high, Ethan. What happened out there, that wasn't about you. That was about them. Don't you ever forget the difference. Ethan nodded, his throat tightening. For the first time since the ordeal began, a small but undeniable smile broke across his face. The school group reassembled inside the terminal, waiting for their bus back. The air was different now, no longer buzzing with excitement about airplanes, but heavy with what they had just witnessed. Ethan sat a little apart, his backpack hugged against his chest, Naomi standing protectively nearby. For once, he didn't feel small. He felt seen. The other kids kept glancing his way, uneasy. The laughter that had spilled so easily before now curdled in their throats. They had watched his humiliation like it was entertainment, and then they'd watched his mother dismantle the entire injustice before their eyes. Finally, one of them, a boy named Lucas, peeled away from the group. Lucas had been the loudest earlier, the one who'd whispered jokes and pointed when Ethan was surrounded by officers. He shuffled awkwardly, hands shoved into his hoodie pocket. Hey. Ethan looked up, silent. Lucas scratched his neck, eyes darting anywhere but Ethan's. So, that was, crazy out there. He paused, swallowing hard. I shouldn't have laughed. That wasn't cool. I'm sorry. The words hung awkwardly, but they were real. Ethan studied him for a long moment. He wasn't sure if he could forgive, not fully, not yet, but hearing the apology mattered. Thanks, Ethan said quietly. Lucas nodded quickly, retreating back to the group, his face flushed. Naomi watched the exchange without saying a word. She knew the apology didn't erase the sting. But it was a start, a ripple of awareness that might stretch further than this single day. Because what those kids saw wasn't just a mother defending her son. It was truth made undeniable. And truth, once seen, is hard to unsee. When the buses rolled away and the hum of the terminal swallowed the last echoes of the confrontation, Harold Denton remained behind, alone by the fence line. The Cessna gleamed in the afternoon light, its propeller still, its shadow stretching across the tarmac. Harold had spent nearly 3 decades with that same view, metal and asphalt, the rhythm of engines, the constant churn of departures and arrivals. It had always felt like his domain. But not today. Today, a woman had walked into his world and exposed it for what it was, not a sanctuary of order, but a stage where his own biases had been allowed to masquerade as authority. Her words replayed in his mind, sharper than any reprimand his supervisors had ever given. How many white boys have you seen pulled aside for daring to admire an aircraft from the fence? He tried to answer it now, standing in the fading light. He couldn't. Not once. Not ever. For years, Harold had told himself he was protecting the airport, keeping things safe. But the truth, the part Naomi had forced into daylight, was uglier. He hadn't seen Ethan as a boy. He had seen him as a threat. And now everyone else had seen that too. The shame pressed heavier than the Texas heat. For the first time in his career, Harold felt small inside the place he had always ruled with quiet suspicion. The badge on his chest no longer felt like a shield. It felt like a mirror. He turned from the plane and walked slowly toward the lot, his steps dragging. For 28 years, he had carried himself like a man who knew the rules. But now he understood, he'd been playing by rules that were never written down, the kind that corrode from the inside. And he knew, deep down, there would be no going back from this day. The drive home was unusually still. The highway stretched ahead, golden in the late afternoon sun, the kind of light that made the world seem both calm and fragile. Naomi kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely on her lap. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. For a while, he didn't speak. His reflection looked back at him in the glass, small, thoughtful, his brow furrowed. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "Mom." Naomi glanced over, her expression softening. "Yes, baby." He hesitated, chewing on the inside of his cheek before the words tumbled out. "Why me? Why did they look at me like that? Like I was, dangerous?" The question was a knife. Naomi gripped the wheel tighter, her knuckles pale. She had hoped, like every mother does, that maybe she could shield him a little longer, delay the day he'd ask it. But the moment had arrived. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Because some people, she said carefully, see what they want to see instead of what's really there. They don't see Ethan Rivers, the boy who loves airplanes, who asks a million questions, who could probably tell me the make and model of every jet on that tarmac. They just see what makes them uncomfortable. And that's their weakness, not yours. Ethan turned toward her, eyes glistening. "But, will it always be like that?" Naomi's throat tightened. She reached over, resting her hand on his knee. "It won't always be like that. Because every time someone like me speaks up, every time someone like you keeps being exactly who you are, the world changes, just a little. And one day, those little changes will add up to something bigger." Ethan swallowed, nodding slowly. He wanted to believe her. And the way she spoke, calm, unshaken, certain, made him believe she just might be right. The car rolled on, the silence returning, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. For the first time that day, Ethan didn't feel small anymore. He felt bigger. By the time Naomi and Ethan pulled into their driveway, the sky had shifted to twilight, streaked with violet and amber. The air was quiet, heavy with the hum of cicadas, the kind of stillness that comes only at the end of a long, relentless day. Naomi cut the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ethan sat staring at the faint contrails overhead, jets cutting through the sky, free and unbothered. "Mom," he said softly, breaking the quiet. "Yes. I don't think I'll ever forget today." His voice cracked just a little, the words trembling between pain and pride. Naomi turned in her seat, her eyes meeting his with steady warmth. "Good," she said simply. "You shouldn't." Ethan blinked, surprised. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Some memories are meant to remind us who we are. Today could have broken you. But instead, it showed you your strength. You didn't lash out. You didn't shrink. You stood there with dignity, even when they tried to take it from you. That matters, Ethan. More than you know." He swallowed hard, his small fingers tightening around hers. Naomi's gaze lifted to the fading contrails, her voice carrying a quiet conviction. "One day, when you're older, you'll understand that moments like this, moments that hurt, moments that challenge, can either plant bitterness or plant purpose. And I promise you, my son, you were born for purpose." Ethan followed her gaze, watching the sky. For the first time all day, he didn't just see airplanes. He saw possibility. As they stepped out of the car and walked inside together, Naomi's words lingered, settling into him like roots. Because in that painful, unforgettable day, Ethan had discovered something far greater than humiliation. He had discovered his mother's truth, that dignity, once claimed, could never be taken. And though the world had tried to make him small, he knew, deep down, that he was meant to stand tall. If you believe stories like this should be told, hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below because your voice matters, too.